Good day, everybody. Thanks for joining. If you had a chance to join, and I am calling this thing Watches This Week. It just meant to be kind of a 15-20 minute discussion of a topic that's occurred to me throughout the week when it comes to the watch industry. Calling this episode 2, and the theme for this one is about something we economists call peer effects. And this topic came about because I saw a Facebook post in one of the watch groups that I belong to, where someone was talking about how an AD was going to ban them or not prioritize them on a wait list because they had so-called flipped a watch that they bought earlier in the summer. I can't exactly remember the reason why they sold the watch, but they claim to have sold it below retail, but the brand, a brand, had seen the serial number online and contacted the AD to complain about it. And this sort of brought me to ask the question, do brands care about who buys their watches? And if so, why? And as an economist, I kind of think about that question under this umbrella topic of peer effects. Okay, so this is the question for today. Do brands want a specific type of person to buy their watches? And if so, why? And, is there good reason for it? So there's, some reasons to believe that brands do want this. Obviously, if you ask them, they might just tell you, yes, this is important for us. And the phenomenon of brand ambassadors would seem to provide evidence that this is something brands do pursue, right? So this is a picture of Lady Gaga. It's a little hard to tell from the picture, but she's wearing a Tudor watch. And I actually did not realize she had joined as a Tudor brand ambassador, but these people, brand ambassadors are chosen for a variety of reasons, but oftentimes they kind of represent some abstract set of characteristics that the brands would like to have associated with their watches. In Lady Gaga's case, it's entertainment and success. Lady Gaga, I guess, also has been active on a couple of different social issues. So when you pick a brand ambassador, you kind of get a sort of warm glow effect from affiliating with people like this, right? So that on the one hand, you'd say, okay, it's obvious that they want specific people wearing their watches, so that you think of the characteristics of those people when you see them wearing the watches, or when you see the watches themselves. But I'm also going to claim that they, they may not actually care at all. Okay, and these are two advertisements from Rolex. It's probably a little hard to see what's featured in these Rolex ads, but the top one focuses on Christopher Columbus, who has recently become a more controversial historical figure in the United States. But basically, he's most well known for sort of colonizing, North America and into South America eventually, was kind of the legacy of his so-called exploration. So that's the top ad celebrating Christopher Columbus. And then the bottom ad is actually, you probably might be able to read it. It says "A Time for Revolution," and that's Che Guevara wearing a Rolex and lighting a cigar. And Guevara actually was, part of a number of revolutions in the Caribbean and South America. And to some extent, you'd think, okay, this is actually a person sort of engaged in overthrowing the legacy of Columbus. Actually, in '61, Che Guevara gave a speech at the UN where he talked about, eliminating imperialism from, this region of the globe. So, if you look at these two ads, you'd say, well, at the end of the day, they're kind of, symbolically these two people are complete opposites, right, from a certain perspective. And so, at the end of the day, maybe, what a person represents actually is not all that important to brands when you look over time, or at least there's no sort of coherent identity that brands reach for. So, there, economists, we do study markets where actually what we call peer effects are very important. Okay, so for a lot of things, like if you buy an apple, like you don't care how many other people are, eating apples, because it's just you enjoy that particular type of apple, and that's the end of it. But for certain things, the other people that buy the product or service, they're going to actually determine your enjoyment of it. Okay, like in a movie theater, if there's people who come into a movie theater and maybe they're talking through the experience, and that's something that frustrates you, or they check their phone, and even the slightest bit of light hampers your enjoyment of the movie, that would be an example of a peer effect where the people who are buying the product or service are actually also going to determine whether you enjoy that product or service. Okay, I'll give a few more examples of these. Clubs are a natural example, where like a golf club, where often they interview people that apply for membership, and that's because people are going to be in the clubhouse together, they're going to be on the course together, and you just want sort of an environment that is acceptable to everybody who's a member, more or less. Co-ops are another example. Places where people live in close proximity. Co-op boards will often interview people who want to buy a house in a co-op. Universities are another classic example. Education is usually the first thing that comes to mind, because the students that are in a class can help or hinder each other in learning, right? So again, the customer of the organization actually determines the nature of the product. Okay, and so the question is whether that's true for watches. And I think when we ask, are there peer effects in the watch industry, I think my answer is maybe. Okay, particularly historically. It's certainly true that we have these meetups where people who have owned different types of luxury watches get together, and that's a sort of a nice feature of maybe owning a particular brand or set of brands of watches. And those, and there can also be sort of a signal attached to a particular ownership of a particular watch, like success, or certain priorities in terms of watchmaking history, that sort of thing. But my feeling is that for most people, it may depend on the brand, but for most people, it's probably not really all about that. I mean, there's also this strong element where you do want something that you personally enjoy, and maybe it has certain functions or complications that are important to you. And also on Instagram, you can see a lot of people having bought a particular brand of watch, but all you see is their wrist. You don't know anything about them, and so the peer effect of who owns the watch is arguably weakened by social media and wrist shots and that sort of thing. So, I'm going to suggest that maybe the peer effects historically have been there, but maybe aren't as strong as they've been in the past. Still, the brands as a whole, and also the collecting community seems to have a sentiment, or there seems to be agreement that a certain type of owner is maybe less desirable. You don't want certain folks that engage in certain behaviors to own watches, and we refer to those people as flippers. I just jokingly put together this graphic. Flipper was also a TV show, I think in the 60s, involving a dolphin. Okay, but everyone seems to not appreciate flippers in the market. This is an article from Watch Pro. I'm not trying to pick on any particular brand, but it's about how Watch Pro is arguing that Patek Philippe prowls the internet looking for flippers, checking for serial numbers of recent releases, and then following up with who bought those watches. And, are there negative peer effects from knowing that, for a brand, from knowing that flippers have bought the watch, or from other collectors knowing that flippers have bought the watch? Well, maybe there's some notion that, if there's a lot of flippers buying a particular reference, it's less about love of the brand or appreciation of the complications or the horology, and it's more about gamesmanship and sort of a profit motive, and maybe that's kind of less desirable for collectors and or brands. But again, I'm not sure how much of that is the reality, but it's certainly an argument you can make. But we also want to acknowledge that flippers can actually have positive peer effects, okay? The first is that when these watches are released and then they start, they show up on the secondary market, the pre-owned market, by so-called flippers, early sellers of the watch, this reveals the true market value of that timepiece. And it can be above the MSRP, it also can be below. And it's actually helpful for people to know the ongoing market value of their timepieces, right? It helps you get adequate insurance coverage. I know insurance has been, a topic people have been talking about a lot recently. And it just, maybe it helps you understand, do you want to keep the timepiece around the house or, put it in a safe deposit box? This is good information for people to know, like what the ongoing market value of their timepieces are. It enhances availability, right? Once the references come out and they've all been sold out, flippers are the ones that are gonna, offer the watches for sale to people who maybe were just a little bit behind the curve for whatever reason in trying to buy a new reference, and maybe they really love the watch and the flippers are actually enabling them to get it, which kind of reduces frustration by collectors. There's less uncertainty associated with flipping. So if you have this option of flipping and for whatever reason you need to cash out of a particular timepiece, you need the cash, having the opportunity to flip is going to help you with that. And also it enhances the cachet of particular timepieces, just all this kind of activity surrounding the timepieces on the secondary market. Hey, did you see this latest steel reference is selling for twice MSRP, right? It kind of creates a buzz and some excitement among collectors and even probably among brands when that happens. So I'm just going to, I've actually written a blog post, a more detailed blog post about this point on Horolonomics, which I haven't posted there in a while, but I have something I'm working on. But so I'm going to say don't player hate, right? So flippers aren't inherently bad. They're just playing the game, and they're not responsible really for the rules of the game. So let me illustrate what I mean by this. So in this table, I have the MSRP for a 2020 Rolex sub no date, which I think when I looked on the website, Rolex's website this morning, it's $8,100. Okay, now as economists, we say people only buy things if sort of their internal valuation of the item is greater than the price, right? You don't buy a $5 cup of Starbucks coffee unless you value it at $7.50 or $10, right? Otherwise, you wouldn't buy it. So I've built an example here where suppose there's two types of two types of buyers. Okay, one is a flipper who has a willingness to pay of $10,000, and then let's say there's other buyers out there, collectors out there who value it at more than twice retail. We'll call them the top willingness to pay people. Maybe these are people who just are just adherents to Rolex or just really love the new sub for whatever reason, really want it. They've been waiting for a new caliber in the reference to roll out, so they're willing to pay more than twice retail. Okay, now both of these types of people will buy the watch if it's available, because they both internally value it greater than the retail price. So in this scenario, if the AD picks the flipper off the wait list, the flipper will buy it. The flipper will experience kind of a benefit of $1,900, right? Because they value it at 10, but they only have to pay $8,100, so that's what we call their surplus. But from an economic perspective, the watch is kind of with the wrong person, okay? If the watch had gone to the top willingness to pay person, then the surplus would be greater by about $8,900, right? And we'd kind of prefer that outcome because there'd be more consumer benefit from the transaction, okay? So when the flipper is picked off the wait list, the brand has, or the AD has made a mistake and picked the wrong person. Okay, the act of flipping it fixes that mistake. It gets the watch in the hands of the person who values it more. Now, they may, at the end of the day, they're not going to have as much of a benefit from buying the watch, right? They're going to have maybe some regret, like, hey, I could have, bought it at 8,100 if I'd been faster, or the AD had picked me, and they would be happier if they had that chance, but they're still getting something that they value at $17,000. They still end up enjoying the watch. But yeah, there may be some regret or buyer's remorse that they couldn't get it at retail. And I think that's where this hate of flippers comes from. Okay, so getting close to the end here, but I don't really get why any brand or AD would kind of care. Beyond brand image, would kind of care if a flipper is buying the watch. Because, everyone's money has the same color. No matter who's buying it, they get the $8,100 no matter what. So, at least from a bottom line perspective, they don't have a beef with anyone they sell it to, as long as they get retail price. So the top willingness to pay person might have a beef because they pay about $9,000 extra. But is that the flipper's fault? No. The flipper is just saying, look, there's other people out there who want this watch more than me. They're willing to pay me more than I value it for, so I'm going to do that. And it's a voluntary transaction, and actually all these transactions are voluntary, all of them. And when there's voluntary transactions, it's very hard to argue that any one person is getting harmed by it. So the underlying cause of this is the shortage and bad wait list management strategy. If a brand or an AD picks the top willingness to pay person from out the gate, then the flipping won't happen. All right. So just to kind of summarize the point of this, I don't think the peer effects are probably very strong in the watch industry. And if they are, they might be weakening given the way social media is used and how that's growing in importance over time. Kind of the intrinsic value of buying and owning a particular watch is more and more what it's all about. My suggestion is don't hate the player, don't hate the flipper. They're actually serving a valuable, important role in the market. Do hate the game, right? The shortages are not good. Wait lists are not good, and mismanaged wait lists are really not good. But again, that's not any collector's fault. Okay. And I asked the question: is this brand whataboutism, right? A distraction from the fact that underlying all of this is the fact that inventories aren't high enough. Wait lists are very hard to manage, and so as a distraction, folks tend to say, well, the flippers are a problem. Is that just, a distraction from the root cause? So I'll stop there. I will post this on Instagram. Looking forward to any feedbacks or comments there. I'll check them out and reply. Thanks for listening, and I hope you have a great day.